Hello everyone, and welcome back to our next Swatch With Me video. I am so excited that today is finally here. This has been a video long in the making. A lot of you had requested the M-Gram Swatch With Me, but I had a fairly small collection of them, not enough to fill an entire page the way I've been doing these. But then you guys suggested that I put out an ask, and so over on my community tab about a month and a half ago or so, I asked for a very low-key ask if you had any small samples that you wanted to send to be included in this video. And so many of you guys came to my aid and sent in little samples for me to add to my collection, and I have put together this, it ended up being 47 colors. So these top two rows have 12 pans each and I'm missing one. These bottom two rows have 13 pans each and I'm missing two. I would say probably about half of these colors came from the collection that I have, maybe a little bit less, and then the rest of them came from viewers like you who wanted to help out on the channel. If you are new to the channel and haven't seen one of my Swatch With Me videos, this isn't one of my typical videos that's highly edited or anything. It's a pretty casual hangout. We're going to look at these colors, I'll tell you about my thoughts and opinions, and it's a really low-key thing. So if that's not your jam, we'll see you in the next video, and if it is, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, today we have 47 colors in the line. M-Gram has a pretty small range of watercolors compared to some others like Daniel Smith or Schmincke. They have 70 colors, and 84% of them, so 59 of their colors, are single pigment. We've got 10 double pigment mixtures, so 2 pigments, and there's one oddball that has 4 in it, and that's olive green, which I don't have to show you today. So basically all the colors that we're looking at today will either have 1 or 2 pigments in them, and that is very common for their line in the whole. Now I am using a new brush that I haven't used in other videos or really much application at all so far. When my local art store was going out of business, I found this Velvet Touch angle shader that I was really excited to try out for paintings, and I haven't gotten to do that yet, but since it's new and it's pretty, I thought it would be fun to try it out for this video. This first color here is Hansa Yellow, and it's made from PY3, so it's what we would call Hansa Yellow Light in other brands, or perhaps Lemon Yellow you might be familiar with. This is being swatched on the Arteza watercolor paper. I don't love this watercolor paper, and I actually found out through some comparisons and everything that it doesn't do the best job at representing color, but in order to be fair as a comparison to all the other swatch videos that I've already done, I'm going to go ahead and do this on this paper so that we don't have inconsistent results, I suppose. The differences on the pigments that it has is that they tend to look a little bit chalkier and they don't kind of settle into the paper as well as they would on a cotton paper. But again, since this is just a swatching video, we're going to go ahead and give it a try. I do want to apologize if I look at this footage during editing and it's completely unusable. I guess I'll just refilm this, but they are doing construction on the apartment next door to mine. And I didn't know that when I had my recording schedule set up, and there's not anything I can really do about it unless I just straight up don't record this today. So hopefully you can't hear it too badly. I know a lot of you guys comment specifically in my live streams that you can't hear when things happen, but this camera is a little bit better at picking up ambient noises, so let's just cross our fingers. This one here is PY151, it's Azo Yellow, and it is quite a bit more opaque. It's definitely a mid-yellow, but I think I prefer this PY97, which is what they call Hansa Yellow Deep. Typically Hansa Yellow Deep is PY65, and it's a much oranger color. This is what other companies like Daniel Smith call Hansa Yellow Medium. It's a beautiful shade of yellow, and along with PY154 is my favorite mid-tone type of yellow. I can tell that this brush doesn't give me quite the same gradient as some of my other brushes do. However, unless it becomes a real big issue, I won't worry about it too much. The next one here, and I apologize, I'm not going to be able to remember off the top of my head who everyone who sent me the individual samples were, but I do have a couple of smaller samples in here that I know are from Mary. And Mary Sanch, she has her own YouTube channel, so she has some beautiful wildlife illustrations and prehistoric animals and lots of dinosaurs, and I definitely recommend checking her out. I think she had a 3-color challenge recently that if it wasn't this color of gamboge, it was something close. It was really pretty. It was a dinosaur that she did in like yellows, oranges, and reds. This is one of the dual pigment colors, the PY 151 and PO 62. Next up is Indian Yellow, and it's made from PY 110. It looks like this is a bit darker, but similar in hue. Yep, that would be accurate. Similar hue, darker. I think I definitely like the 110 better. Maybe Indian Yellow is what she used in that dinosaur video recently. Then we have, that looks wrong. Azo Yellow. Azo Orange, aha! This is Azo Orange, not, not Azo Yellow. We already did Azo Yellow over here. So this is Azo Orange, PO 62. Move this over a little bit so I have some room here. And this is your nice, bright Halloween orange that Victor and Tiffany love so much. I'm really curious if it's just the, like this isn't a hard brush, it's pretty soft, and I'm wondering if it's just the paper not wanting to cooperate in conjunction with the brush. That's another semi-opaque pigment. Here we have Cadmium Orange, which was another color that Mary sent over. It's deeper and a little bit more on the red side than the Azo Orange. Should we switch to a different brush? We can give it a try. Oh, it's been so long since I've recorded one of these, I don't even know what brushes I was using in the other ones. Go with our trusty silver black velvet. Next up is Quinacridone Red. This is PR 209, and it's kind of like a corally, can't decide if it wants to be orange or pink in a lot of brands. This one definitely looks more pink from M. Graham. So with our silver black velvet we can get smoother washes, but the edges aren't going to be as pretty. The brush is so nice and handy for creating nice little boxes. Try and get more pigment up here. This is a very transparent color. Even when you lay it down really thickly, you're going to have a hard time having it appear opaque. Naphtha Red is next. This is PR 112. This was in the original set of colors that M. Graham sent to me to review. This is kind of like an alternative to a Pyrrole Red, PR 254, which is actually right next door. But I believe the Naphtha Red is a bit less light fast. Let me check on their chart. Yes. This is a light fast rating of 2 from the ASTM, and this one has a light fast rating of 1. This is PR 254. I do prefer PR 254. It has a little bit more body and depth to it, but it will dry a bit still on the flat side. And what I mean by that is it just doesn't have a luminosity or a glow to it like some other colors do. Like this Quin Red is going to be very airy and light and has like this quality to it that I can't really put into words, but these two colors here are a bit more matte and flat. So depending on what you're looking for, that could be a good thing. Now I have an empty spot for a color that I thought was coming and then I didn't receive, which is absolutely totally fine, but I left it there just in case it straggles in a little bit late. So we're going to be skipping over to the next box, which is Quinacridone Rose. This is PV19. So on the whole, M. Graham has incredibly pigmented watercolors, and I have two different videos, I believe. I have my original review and then I have an updated review, and so I'll link both of those in the description below so you can go ahead and check those out. And the reason I mention that is PV19 is usually a pretty transparent color, and in M. Graham it can actually be not semi-opaque, I would say semi-transparent, where it definitely has a bit of a, I want to say foggy, I don't know why I want to say foggy, but just has like this quality to it that I don't see in other Quinacridone roses that make it a little less transparent. And so that is one thing to note. I do currently have this color on my main palette because it was the only PV19 that I had in a tube. But I recently was able to replace my favorite PV19, which is from Michigan Gold, and so when my palette color runs out, I'll be replacing it with that one. Little tea break to make sure my my vocal cords can keep going. Next up I have Permanent Alizarin Crimson, and I should add that I haven't gotten to make swatch cards of these and add them to the binder yet, the ones that are new. So some of these I'm going to be seeing for the first time with you guys, and oh my goodness, this color is gorgeous. It's so beautiful. I don't know if I have much PR 264. Even though this is rated as permanent, it is a light fast rating of 2 rather than 1. But that's better than the Alizarin Crimson anyway, which is quite fugitive. They offer both. They have the original one in their line. Let's see if I can get that glare off the paint for you. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Next up is a favorite from a lot of you guys. It's Perylene Maroon Pr 179. It's kind of a deep brickish red. And you can just see how pigmented these are. Like, I haven't pre-wet any of these paints. Most of you already know that about M. Graham, where they just never really set up fully, and some of them are stickier than others. Some of them are, like when I go in with a paintbrush, you want to add a little bit of extra water like you would with any other watercolor, and some of them are just still sticky. They have honey in them, and again, I talk more about that in the review videos. Next up, we have a really cool little set of about 4 unique purples that I'm really excited to try out and show off here. This first one is Ultramarine Pink, and it's made from PR 258. This is another color that I got when my local store was going out of business, since it was a bit on sale and it wasn't a pigment that I've used before, and it was a really pretty shade of purple. I was like, you know what, let's go ahead and try that out. So this is a very granulating, light pinkish purpley orange. I don't know why orange was going to be in that sentence. It's a granulating, light purpley pink type of color. I believe we tried this out on one of the live streams, or I tried it out before a live stream and showed it on a live stream. It's really pretty. Next up we have Mineral Violet. And this is a combination of PV15 and PV16. And I want to check these really quickly. I have the chart sitting next to me. Light fast rating 1, 1, 1, and 1. All of these have excellent light fastness ratings, these 4 purples here. This is very similar to the Ultramarine Pink, but it is more purple. It's so pretty. I remember the first time I saw Granulating Purple, and I think it was before I started appreciating granulation in general. It was a My Mary Blue color that Victor sent to me, and it was a mineral purple or mineral violet, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. But I have since come to appreciate them. Alright, these next two, I'm going to put them like where they're respectively supposed to go. But they're switched in order of hues, if that makes sense. So this Cobalt Violet, I'm skipping one space ahead of my palette. That's PV14. And I think the reason I switched them on the palette is because this one has a more blue tint to it. And this one is going to be closer to those other ones. So I apologize, they're a little bit out of a pleasing gradient of colors, but if you prefer the more bluish purples, let me know in the comments below. I am a sucker, and you guys probably know this. I love warm violets. That's my comfy place, and I don't as much like the cooler purples, but I know a lot of you guys like the cooler ones. So let me know in the comments below which one you guys prefer. And then this last one in this row I received recently. And this one is the Ultramarine Violet Deep. And this is made, it's mixed with this Mineral Violet with the PV16. Yeah, I think if I had swatched these on, or swapped these swatches on the paper, this would have been like a perfect soft gradient. And it's really cool that Mgram offers these different varieties of granulating purples. If you guys are interested in seeing the finished swatch charts, I put them up over on Patreon. I scanned them with my new pretty scanner that support from my patrons allowed me to be able to purchase. Oh, you know what? I'm painting on top of this other piece of paper, and I'm not really sure why. This is our second page. Let's move that out of the way just in case. Next we have a favorite from a lot of people, and a lot of people really like Mgram's version. This is Dioxazine Violet, and it's almost going to be black in its mass tone, so I'm going to try and fade this over the pigment number so we can still see that. Mgram's is so beautiful. I absolutely love their version of this. Just like all the other colors, it's so pigmented. Then we have my favorite Mgram color. I mean, it's hard to pick one, but you guys know what it is, right? Even if you weren't cheating and looking ahead. This is Anthraquinone Blue. I had a lot of water on my brush. For these darker ones, I'm going to try and do a lighter wash over those numbers, and then we'll drop in a bit more color so you guys can see the true potential of how dark they are. Look at this granulation that's coming out over here. It's so pretty. Alright, and then we have good old Ultramarine. Now, this is similar. I know I just pointed out these colors granulate here, but on the whole, Graham has some pretty soft colors, and because they're so pigmented and rich and smooth, they don't have as much granulation as some other companies. So if you do not like granulating colors, or you don't like granulating ultramarines but would still like to have that hue to work with on your palette, I recommend either Graham or Sennelier. Sennelier is the one I currently have on my main palette just because, I don't know, it was what was on hand. But Graham's is also another really nice one. And it does still granulate a bit, but not as strongly as some of your others like Daniel Smith would. Next we have Cobalt Blue, and Cobalt Blue is going to be somewhat similar to Ultramarine, although it's a little bit, I don't know how, like these Cobalt Cerulean Blues, they tend to be in this like in-between where I don't really know whether or not to say that they're cooler or warmer. I personally feel like Cobalt Blue is cooler than Ultramarine. Like I feel Ultramarine is closer to purple, but some people have the opposite thoughts on that, and I've talked about that in other videos and we won't go into a big debate on it here, but it's just slightly different. It's a bit lighter in hue. It's not as dark as the Ultramarine, and Ultramarine is less toxic. And also, when we talked about our Cobalt Teal video, we talked a little bit in the comments about the cobalt mines in Africa, and so in general, I am not going to be purchasing any cobalt colors from here on forward, but we do have several here from Graham that we're going to be taking a look at. I do know that Graham is a very eco-conscious company, and I'm hoping they didn't reply to my email, so it's not a great sign, but could have just gotten lost. I'll try and give them the benefit of the doubt. There are cobalt mines like in Canada, and I'm hoping that they get their pigments from an eco-friendly type of situation. And I know that their cleaning practices and things like that, they try and reduce the amount of waste. So if I am going to buy cobalt colors, I mean, it's nice to have Graham as an option here in the United States anyway. Cerulean Blue and Cerulean Blue Deep, this is deep, this is blue, are some really pretty colors. They're also cobalt colors. And I drastically prefer this Cerulean Blue to the Cobalt. I think this is a really beautiful color, and in the lighter tones, I think it's really nice for like skies. We've got regular Cerulean Blue. So this is PB36, this is PB35. Interesting. I would say that this Cerulean Blue, it's lighter, but it's also like a different hue. This feels almost leaning a little bit teal to me, and this one is more blue. They're both really pretty. All of these are granulating colors. This probably has the most granulation out of the three. And next up is our controversial slash sad slash beautiful Prussian Blue. So if I'm going to be using a Prussian Blue, it's going to be Graham's. I absolutely love the hue of their Prussian Blue. But as many of you guys know, I took Prussian Blue off of my palette because it fades very drastically in my personal light fast tests. And again, I don't want to argue the semantics about this. If you want to use it, absolutely use it. I'm not trying to tell you not to use this color, but for me, I understand that if you put it in a closet it'll come back, or if you keep it protected, it'll come back, yada, yada, yada. But I do professional paintings that I sell for money and commissions and things like that, and I don't feel comfortable handing over a painting to a client that may fade much more easily than some other colors, especially when I have the other colors available to me, if that makes sense. So again, not telling you not to use that color. I'm just saying that it does fade really drastically. It's not just M-grams, it's pretty much all Prussian blues. I think there's some handmade Prussian blues that don't fade as much, but I don't know off the top of my head which ones those are. And I personally, as just a human, the personal artist, I would rather use a different color if I have access to it. Next door, we have Phthalo Blue Red shade, and theirs is actually made from PB15:0. A lot of Phthalo Blue Red shades come from PB16:6. PB15:6. Is that what I said? I don't know if I said 15 or 16. And this color I feel like is a suitable replacement for Prussian blue. It's not the same. I can see it's not the same, but I think you can use it for the same types of applications and have it be similar. I guess I should also add, I really like M-grams Prussian blue because it's not as green as some other varieties that I've seen, and I like warmer blues. And you can kind of see in the mass tone here, these are somewhat similar. And next door we have the Phthalo Blue Green shade. This is your typical Phthalo Blue. And some people would say that this is closer to the Prussian. But I never fully agreed with that comparison. I think that they're quite different colors. And in fact, when I took Prussian blue off of my main palette because of the light fastness issue, I replaced it with the Anthraquinone Blue. And the reason I did that is I know that they're completely different colors. I know that this one is much, much, much warmer. But I used Prussian blue as like my dark / dark blue, but like mainly for mixing darks. And so I use Anthraquinone for the same purpose. And I know that I'm probably in the minority there. I don't think I've ever heard another artist say that they do the same thing, but for me it works. And you just have to find what works for you. But I think these three colors are all more similar to each other than this one. This one feels just so much greener to me. Alright, next up is probably my second favorite color from M-gram. It's their Cobalt Teal. It's made from PB28, which is the same as their Cobalt Blue on the front of this line. We did a color spotlight episode on Cobalt Teal recently, so I'll go ahead and put that in the iCard for you. It's a very softly granulating version of this color, and it's pretty middle of the road. Like, it's not super blue, it's not super green, falls somewhere right in between. In our last row, we're going to start off with turquoise. Okay, maybe I lied. I have lots of favorite colors from M-gram, guys. It's hard to pick one. I love their turquoise also. A lot of companies do have a turquoise that is, basically this would be Phthalo Blue and Phthalo Green together. I just love this color. We took a look at a color similar to this in our Quinacridone Burnt Orange spotlight, because mixed with that color it makes some really gorgeous shades of green. It's a bit awkward. I'm in this last row and don't really have anywhere to hold on to. Try to make sure my paper doesn't fly around. We've exited the granulating colors. Oh, for the record, these two are not granulating colors, but the rest in that row are to some degree. And we've got these two are non-granulating as well. Next up is that Phthalo Green that's used to mix this turquoise. And I feel like M-gram's Phthalo Green is, it feels more yellow to me than other PG7s. They do have a yellow shade, and we're going to see that right here. But it doesn't feel as blue to me as some of the other ones. And I think actually I added BS because for blue shade, because that's what this pigment is, but I don't think they call theirs Phthalo Green Blue shade. I think they just call it Phthalo Green. I could be wrong though. I don't know if I have the tube or if that's something that someone sent to me. Check real quick. Yeah, no, I don't have that. Oops, bumped the camera. My apologies. Alright, next up is Viridian, and I don't use Viridian very much, but I do know that it can be a really difficult color to re-wet, and it's still not the easiest to re-wet in M-Gram, but due to the fact that M-Gram's colors re-wet more easily than a lot of other brands, I do think that this one, it certainly fares better than Daniel Smith's, and I'm not sure how it stacks up to some other brands. This is a granulating green, and a lot of people will use Viridian or Phthalo Green like in the same place as each other, and I again disagree with that. I think they're very different. I don't have Viridian on my main palette, so maybe that's why my opinion might be a little bit biased there. But this is a granulating green, it's much softer, and I think that there's room for both on a single palette if you wanted them both. I don't know what I would use Viridian for, so I don't keep it as a go-to. Now, this next color, Phthalo Green Yellow shade, is the one I just used for the collaboration video with Arlisha. And it turned out to be a gorgeous mixing color, and I really enjoyed using it. And here we can definitely tell that this is more yellow than their blue shade. And this is actually deepening as it dries, so maybe it was just my initial thoughts as it went on the paper that it looked more yellow, but as it's drying it's getting a little bit more blue in tone. All of these seem to be very transparent colors, with the Viridian maybe being slightly less transparent because of the granulation, but for the most part these phthalo colors are going to be real transparent for you. I don't know what happened to the edge of this thing. It's all cattywampus. Next up we have a fairly unique one. This is Cobalt Green, and this is PG50. A lot of companies use PG50 to make their Cobalt Teal, but it's also used for Cobalt Green. I apologize, I have like a little splotch of color underneath that's a bit orange. I've had these sheets drawn up for a couple of weeks, and then found out a couple more samples were coming my way, so I wanted to wait on the recording of it. Alright, next we have Permanent Green Light, which is PG7 and PY151. So we can start to see these combinations because they're so simple and just two-tone mixes. This is a combination of this color here and this one up here. So if you have those two colors on your palette, you don't need this other one unless you really want a convenience green mixed up for yourself. Because of that yellow, it's going to be slightly opaque. And this feels pretty similar to me to the Phthalo Green Yellow shade. I would have to use it in mixes to see if it performs the same way, or we can wait to see if it dries and see if maybe they dry differently. But if you have Phthalo Green Yellow shade, I don't think you need this one either. Then we have Hooker's Green, so that's the PG7 mixed with the PY110, so we should expect this to be a little bit more earthy and warm. The pan is certainly much darker than these previous ones. These previous ones match pretty much the color that they're down on the page with, and this next one is really dark. You You can definitely see that influence of the warm yellow. And we'll set this aside to dry. And I only have a little less than half of this page filled up on the second sheet. We only have 13 colors left. I think this one went by pretty quickly. We're only at like 30-ish minutes. Maybe I'm getting faster at these guys. Next up is their Sap Green, and I do find this color a little bit lackluster. It's made with the same combination as the Hooker's Green, but this one just feels really flat to me, especially when it dries. We can wait till that happens so you guys can kind of take a closer look at that. Like, it goes down fine when it's wet, and then it just loses a lot of its saturation in the drying process and gets a bit flat. We've got the light shining on that side. Next up is transparent yellow iron oxide. And I believe that this one, like, made me make an audible gasp when I painted it out. It's not the prettiest of colors on its own. It's made from the same pigment as yellow ochre, but it's not processed the same way, and I don't have their yellow ochre to compare it to, but this is definitely more greenish brown than it is yellow. It's definitely more transparent than a typical yellow ochre would be, but I feel like there are other colors that I personally would use. Again, all of these are my personal thoughts. Not trying to sway your opinion. These are educational videos. I should have said this at the beginning. I always mean to, and then forget, especially now that I'm rusty and out of practice with our Swatch With Me videos. But these videos are really meant to help you see the colors side by side so that you can make more informed decisions. It's not to try and entice you to buy a bunch of new colors or to give you things you don't need, but rather just to make informed decisions. So, especially when we put this raw sienna next to this transparent yellow iron oxide, like, this just does not look pretty to me at all. Kind of looks sickly almost, but it is a heck of a lot more transparent than the raw sienna, so there's that. This is a pretty opaque raw sienna for raw siennas. Siennas tend to be a little bit more opaque, but that one's pretty strong. It'll probably lighten as it dries, but we'll have to see. Next up is their nickel quinacridone gold. I like that they specify because they use nickel azo yellow in it. And most companies do use nickel azo yellow for their quinacridone gold hues, but I like that they put theirs in their name. So this is nickel azo yellow and quinacridone burnt orange. Grams, I find, is a very yellow version of this hue. Has a lot of that nickel quinacridone, or nickel azo yellow. I prefer a little bit earthier quinacridone golds. Next up we have kind of like the companion to this one. This is transparent yellow iron oxide. This is transparent orange iron oxide. This is made from PY42 and PR101. And I much prefer this color, just as a general color. When we get to this next row, I'm not sure that I would have use for this color in addition to some of the other colors that I really like from them. But it certainly is a nice color on its own. And would certainly be useful for earth tones if you didn't have access to some of these other colors. Next up is Quinacridone Rust, which is Imgram's version of Quinacridone Orange, burnt orange. Imgram's dries more brown, as we saw in the Quinacridone Orange video, and it granulates more heavily. And we have the third companion to our yellow, orange, and now red Iron Oxides. This is going to be a very similar color to Quinacridone Rust, and I've heard a lot of people say that you can use either or, and typically you wouldn't have both of these on the palette because they're incredibly similar. This is the reddish transparent version of PR101, and we'll get to see the opaque version of PR101. And I get a lot of people asking me what the difference is with different pigments looking so different, and some pigments are always going to look the same, like ultramarines pretty much always look about the same, and there's some pigments that can drastically change based on how you process them, like PV19 or PR101. So it's important to know the pigment numbers, but also to know if there are some exceptions, like what that would mean. I did end up buying back when I went to Budapest, and it was fairly early on in my watercolor adventures, very early on in my channel for sure. And I got some Van Gogh colors, and I had a really limited selection of open stock Van Gogh watercolors. And I was trying to pick out a burnt sienna. They didn't have one, so I picked up a PR101, and it was the more opaque version when I was expecting the lighter version, so I went back the next day and got a different one so that I had both. But here's the drastic reveal of the... Wait, no, that's the wrong one. Oh, so much for my big reveal here. It's okay. It's an opaque color. We can paint over that. It'll be fine. Here's the big reveal for the Terra Rosa PR101, and this is my favorite version of English or Venetian or whatever type of red. It's this beautiful brick color that fades out to a really subtle little pink, like a earthy pink. But you can see the vast difference between the way that those pigments look, even though it's the same one. Okay, now burnt sienna, which tried to come out too early. Theirs is a very brownish burnt sienna. It's a lot less red than some other brands. It's just going to depend on what your personal preference for burnt sienna is. And then we have burnt umber. Do we have burnt umber? Did I do this wrong again? Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, here's burnt umber. I think what I did, we'll try it. I think what I did is I put down the first layer of burnt sienna the right way, and then I added burnt umber to it instead of more burnt sienna. Let me see. I need a sample. I need a card. Scrap paper. No, that's burnt sienna. Okay. It's just a weird interaction with the palette. Let me go ahead and paint over that swatch just so that it has a little bit more intensity to it. Work with me, paint. Work with me. There we go. Okay, so you can see that this burnt sienna, it does have a reddish undertone. This one is more brown, but these are pretty similar for the burnt sienna and burnt embers. Like, they're closer together than they are in some other brands, if that makes sense. In Daniel Smith's, the burnt sienna is more of a pinky brown, and the burnt umber is a rich dark brown. As long as I get this accurate so you guys can tell the difference, I'll be happy. And then next we have raw umber, which I was like, this is not burnt umber. It's a much cooler brown, made from the same pigment, but very, very different in its color. And the next color spotlight is going to be on burnt and raw umbers. So we're going to be talking about these two variations of PBR7. The burnt sienna was in a video that I did in the last run of the color spotlight series, and the fourth color that goes with this is here. So raw sienna, raw umber, burnt umber. All made from PBR7. We only have two colors left. We have a sepia, which is made from PBR7 and PBK6. This is really pretty. I don't often like sepias in a lot of brands. They're too like flat for me, but this is a really pretty inky brown. And then our last one, poor lonely guy on this next line over here, is Payne's Gray, PBK9 and PB29. I'm going to do that lighter layer so we can get the whole box colored in, and then I'll drop in some darker color so you can see the mass tone. All right. So aside from my fumble over here, we went through the colors pretty efficiently, and I can show you all of them now. Here is our first page, and I will go ahead and put a scan of the colors at the end of this video, and then you can see them over on Patreon as well. But just to go through them and kind of chatting through my thoughts on them. We've got a couple of lighter yellows that are more opaque over here. My favorite one is Hansa Yellow Deep, which is a mid-tone that has a bit more transparency to it. I do prefer the Indian Yellow over the Gamboge, but the Gamboge has more of a yellow undertone if you enjoy that. The Azo Yellow and the Cadmium Orange are both pretty opaque. Honestly, I don't know that I would choose either of those. I know I'm not a big orange lover in general, but if I was going to pick an orange, it would be probably from a different brand. Then we've got some reds, and I didn't mention this before, but M. Graham does have a very limited selection of reds, and specifically pinks. So if you're a floral painter, I could understand not being drawn to this brand, or if you are drawn from other characteristics, to have some reds from other companies, because a lot of other companies do a better job at exploring this big range. And I'm kind of curious, I would hope that they would do some new pigments soon. I don't know what their plans are, I don't know anything about that, but we have these other companies that are releasing more colors, and it would be fun to see if they come out with some new ones too. So we've got Quinacridone Red, which is kind of like this, again, doesn't know if it wants to be orange or pink type of color, but it's very, very transparent. We've got our two flatter reds that you can see here, kind of what I'm talking about it not being as luminous as the Quinacridone colors. Quin Rose is going to be their main pink that they have, and I think that's it, guys. I'm pretty sure that's their only pink, aside from like Ultramarine Pink in the next row, which isn't really pink. They have a gorgeous permanent alizarin crimson. I'm really curious to use this more and see how it does in mixes. We've got a Perylene Maroon that a lot of people really enjoy. This is definitely kind of a brickish reddish brown. We've got a beautiful range of purples that are very subtly different. I would say that these three are all, maybe these two are similar and these two are similar, but these two are also similar to each other. They're all very close, but this is definitely the most transparent. The Cobalt Violet has the least amount of coverage here. The Mineral Violet is the most opaque, and then we've got these other two here. This Ultramarine Pink is really soft and pretty, and is kind of like a more purple Potter's Pink. It definitely has more purple undertones though. Over here we've got Dioxazine Violet. We have our deep Anthraquinone Blue. I didn't mention it in this video, but you guys have heard me mention in other videos that it does have this weird textural property to it. Typically, Indanthrone Blue. Come on, can you focus? Okay. Typically Indanthrone Blue doesn't granulate, but it has this weird type of texture to it. Again, I use this for a dark rather than a blue in most cases, so that's okay for me. But depending on what you want to use that for, that might be something to take in consideration, but it is definitely the most blue version of this color that I have found. Then we've got Ultramarine and Cobalt Blue, and those are fairly similar to each other. Again, I prefer the Ultramarine just for environmental impact reasons, and I also think the color is a little bit nicer. Then we have Cerulean Blue Deep and Cerulean Blue, which are really beautiful. This is really unique because it's kind of more of a teal color, but I think the Cerulean Blue would be more useful, especially for like a landscape painter, for skies and things like that. We've got our Prussian Blue that is really beautiful, but doesn't stay stable in the sunlight. Again, we've talked about that in other videos, so I won't harp on that too much here. We have two versions of Phthalo Blue here. We have the red shade and the blue shade, which actually, now that they've dried, are fairly similar in color. This does have more of a green undertone. This has more of a red undertone, but they're pretty subtle. We have our Cobalt Teal that has a nice little granulation pattern, and we looked more at that in a color spotlight video. We've got our Turquoise. It's a beautiful deep teal. We've got our two Phthalo Greens, so blue shade, yellow shade. Viridian right here, which again, if you're going to use Viridian, I do recommend grams. I think theirs rewets really beautifully. We've got the Cobalt Green that is a granulating kind of flatter green made from the pigment that Cobalt Teal is typically made from. The Permanent Green Light did dry very similarly to the yellow shade of the Phthalo Green. I would recommend just getting the Phthalo Green yellow shade because I think it would be a more stable mixer, but I don't know. That's just a conjecture based on information from the past, if that makes sense. An educated guess, there we go. Here we have Hooker's Green, which is made from the same pigments as their Sap Green. I do prefer the Hooker's Green a lot more. I think it's a prettier color, although very different. Their Sap Green just falls a little bit flat for me. Over in our earth tones that aren't completely done drying, but they are close, we've got our weird shade of yellow iron oxide that is very transparent but kind of greenish in color. We've got our raw sienna, which did get less opaque as it dried, as I was guessing it would, but it's a nice, rich, it's like a camel. Like it's a camel brown for sure. Nice flat tan color. We've got our nickel quinacridone gold, which is definitely more on the yellow side of things in terms of quinacridone gold type colors. The transparent orange iron oxide is a really pretty soft brown, but depending on your palette, you might have another substitute, like maybe raw sienna, or some of the Daniel Smith colors are in the same range as well, so just depends on what you already have. Quinacridone Rust and red iron oxide are similar in color. You can see that this one did dry more on the orange side, whereas this is more brown, but you probably don't need both on a palette. I thought I did once upon a time. I put both of these colors into my main palette actually, and I ended up removing the transparent red iron oxide and replacing it with something else. Then we've got the beautiful Terra Rosa, which is a very soft, more opaque, but you can see when I put this down, it was like covering the PR 101 almost entirely. It does dry more, or less opaquely, I should say, more transparent, and then softens off to a really pretty natural pink. We've got the burnt sienna and burnt umber that are fairly similar in color, and honestly, I prefer more of a difference in my palette. I do like to keep both of these on my palette, but in Daniel Smith, the gap between them is a little bit bigger, so you have a wider range in color. I do think that the raw umber has a place. Raw umber is a little bit newer on my palette, and again, we'll talk about more about that in an upcoming color spotlight video about how it finally made it onto my palette, and I think this is fairly comparable to some other versions I've seen, but I do prefer the sepia a little bit more. I think it's a really pretty deep inky color. And then finally we have Payne's Gray, which is a 2-pigment mix. Some companies use 3 pigments for that, so it's nice to see a smaller amount. One of the colors that I was a little bit sad that I didn't get to try out, but my store was also out of it, so I couldn't pick it up, was the neutral tint. I've heard really great things about the neutral tint. It's only made from 2 colors, again, like this Payne's Gray. So I've heard great things. I just haven't seen it yet in person. So I hope, whoop, there goes that paper. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video today and enjoyed the nice, slow swatch with me look at M. Graham. Again, links for the full reviews will be down in the description below, and also link the color spotlight videos that I talked about too. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Wait a second, don't go yet, I almost forgot. I have some other things to show you, and I alluded to this in one of my other videos just really quickly, but I have 2 little sets here of 12 M. Graham colors. These are the Hansa Yellow, Nickel Quinacridone Gold, Azo Orange, Naphtha Red, Quinacridone Rose, Dioxazine Violet, Ultramarine, Anthraquinone Blue, Phthalo Blue, green shade, Cerulean Blue, Phthalo Green, yellow shade, and Sap Green. I have these 2 sets here. One is a little sampler pack, and the other one is mostly full pans. They're kind of like 3/4 full pans because M. Graham's dry very tacky, and I wanted these to be able to ship without touching the top of anything. But I know it's really hard for some of you guys to get your hands on M. Graham paints or samples because they don't travel very well on sample cards. So I've made these 2 little sets up. These are paints that I had in my own collection, not paints that people sent me, so I'm not trying to profit or anything off of other people, but they were some extra paints that I had lying around in my collection and thought that others might enjoy being able to try them out. So if you would like either of these sets, they're available over on Etsy. I just have the 2 right now, but if it's something that there is a ton of interest in, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see if there's anything I can do in the future. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.